Now, is anyone going to say anything? No one wants to be the first to say anything.
La 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 la. Boom, 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 boom. 4 men in a wormhole.
Always.
We're ready.
Welcome to 4 Men in a Wormhole. It's been a while. I'm moving whilst I say this, but in my space capsule, as you can see behind me. And joining me, as always, are my three companions, my three Wormies extraordinaire. Mr. Adam Leach, firstly, welcome.
Hi, hello, Stephen. Hi, gents. How's everyone?
All good, thank you. Hello, Tal Silverman.
Hello, Stephen and everyone.
Hi,
Hello,
Tal.
Tal and everyone. And last but never least, Mr. Simon Cohen. Hello.
Hey guys, good to see you.
Hi, Simon.
Good to see you too. So here we are on another episode of 4 Men in a Wormhole. Us, the original Wormies, being listened to by many other Wormies. And we're going to do what we do best, which is dive into what sci-fi we have been enjoying or possibly not enjoying since the last show. And it's been a while since we've done a show. Apologies to our many listeners in France. But that means we've got quite a lot to talk about because there's been a lot of cool stuff that's been on in the cinema and in streaming services and whatnot. So I think we should dive straight in. Simon, what do you want to talk about? I believe you want to talk about Strange New Worlds and maybe the people that brought sci-fi to us visually. So let's start with Star Trek, shall we?
Oh, we should always start with Star Trek every episode. Strange New Worlds finally got to watch it a little bit late because Paramount Plus launched late here, and actually we watched some of it together, didn't we, guys? We had a little communal viewing of Strange New Worlds. What did I think of it? Well, I think let me start with the positives. This feels like Star Trek again. Like it takes you back to the sort of episodic, sort of feel good Star Trek type episodes that you had in the original series and the Next Generation, and probably we haven't seen since Voyager. And so, lots of fun, lots of enjoyment, a little bit of silliness and craziness. And yeah, it feels a lot more like Star Trek than Discovery or even Picard, actually. So that's the positive. The negative, and I think you guys know this because we have talked about it, but it took a while to get into it. It took a few episodes to get into it because, like a lot of the modern Star Trek shows, it delves quite deep into sort of some of the characters a little bit too early for my liking. So I didn't quite get into it straight away. And then it started to get good and interesting, and we enjoyed some of the episodes we watched together. And then actually, the last episode in the show was the best in the season. Actually, it was very, very good. And I don't want to spoil anything for anyone, but it was, alternate timelines and meeting some familiar characters that we've seen before in Star Trek. So it finished on a high, and it left me actually wanting more and looking forward to the next season. But I have to say, through most of it, I wasn't overly excited, but it did finish well. When you guys watched it as well, or I think most of it, I think Tal's got his hand up, or is he just pulling faces at me?
My hand's disappearing on the background, so you can't tell. Oh yeah, I can tell you what I think. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you may have. Do you have a hunch that season 2 will pick up exactly where it left off? If they obviously left on such a good note, do you think it's going to kind of rip along, or are they going to do that classic thing where they just completely ignore what happened at the end of one season and just go and start doing something different?
It wasn't left with a cliffhanger.
Right.
Although there was something that happened right at the end, which will lead into season 2. The overall story arc of season 1 was Captain Pike. And actually, I probably should have said at the beginning, for anyone that doesn't know what Star Trek: Strange New Worlds is it's Captain Pike, the version that we saw in Star Trek Discovery season 2, and Spock is in that as well, and we see Pike on the Enterprise. If you remember in Discovery, Pike discovered what his future was going to be, which is actually featured in the original series, and we see him with a debilitating disease where he's completely disabled and can't move any of his limbs, and so he sees that future. He sees how it happens in Discovery season 2, and so this is constantly on his mind throughout Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, and the final episode sort of, I wouldn't say completes that story arc, but provides a bit of closure to that story. It is done in a good way, though, that whole storyline, because it's not, banging on about it every episode. Each episode is a standalone episode, every single one of them. But there's just this underlying thread which finishes itself nicely, I think, in the finale. Stephen?
Yeah, and so to pick up Tal's question, yeah, I mean, Simon's answered it, but because of that overarching, we know it's destiny kind of thing, um, they can't abandon anything that's happened in this series, and I think it will feel very, very connected with each series that they do of it. I don't know how many series they're going to do, but however many series they do, I think it will feel very, very connected. And I loved it. I've watched it twice now. I watched it when I had COVID, and I've watched it with you guys. And I loved the fact that, as you said, it was traditional episodic Star Trek in the style of Next Gen or the original series, but with an overarching thematic story to it. And also, let's be honest, we've been really hard on Discovery, all of us here, especially Adam, but especially me, on its wokeism. Not that we're anti people being more caring and understanding in life, but the point is, Discovery went out of its way, and it always felt that no one actually had a job, no one was no one was actually had a role on the ship. They were just walking around in therapy sessions all the time, and there was no one willing to I don't know, be a bit cheeky or even a bit not woke, because it would be frowned upon. And what's nice about Strange New Worlds is it's got some real characters in it who can be abrasive, can be cheeky. Maybe not quite as much as still the Next Gen or certainly the original Star Trek, but much more in that direction. And so it just felt more grounded in terms of the characters and people actually working departments in the ship, and it felt like a working ship and all this kind of stuff. I think it was really, really, really good for that. Tal?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think for me that was kind of the a big positive for it. I actually thought the humorous stuff they dealt with really well. Actually, I thought the funny bits were genuinely funny, and it didn't feel like it was trying too hard. And the same with the wokeness as well. They didn't feel that I had to kind of really push that too much. In fact, I think we commented, didn't we? There was one particular episode that felt a bit like it was an episode of Lower Decks, wasn't there? It was like, it just had that sort of irreverent humor, and they sort of played on the kind of rank of everybody and who was who and all this sort of thing. And I thought I thought it was really well done. I quite like the fact that each of the stories were their own within it. I definitely did like that. I mean, I have to say I haven't seen, I don't think me and Adam have seen the last couple of episodes, so I think I might be one episode short, I think, but yeah, I need to try and see it at some point. I would like to definitely catch the end of it. Go on, Adam.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of chime in. I thought it was good. Visually, it's great. It really was really good to watch. I think the stories. I sort of agree with Simon. It was sort of like a slow burn. Like, I think if it was easier for me to watch, like, I just mean that it didn't involve getting in a car, driving over to Simon's house and watching it. Although that was lovely. I mean, if it was just like there and I could have just done a couple of episodes, I probably would have just stuck with it and finished it. And it seemed like a good start, but it didn't blow me away.
There was only 2 or 3 episodes that I thought were really good, but it's worth watching to the end because the final episode is very good, and there's some treats in there for.
Would you describe that as like fan service, or is there actual?
It isn't.
Oh,
I
no,
mean,
it's not
it's not
Easter
just.
egg.
It's not just fan service. There's good reasons why they put certain things in,
Right. Okay.
and it's done very well and very relevant to the story. So I recommend watching it to the end. I think Adam, I know you like a sort of time travel and alternative timelines type story. So you could just go to the final episode and watch that if you want. Don't actually need to watch the ones before.
Yeah, and it's you talk about the way it looks. It does look really good. It looks
Yeah.
phenomenally good, and yeah, I just I thought it was the closest we've come to Star Trek, the way Star Trek was for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Picard is. I mean, actually, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Picard season 3, because that's going to be a lot more ship based, as we've seen through the trailers. And maybe we can digress in that in a minute. I know Adam wants to chime in on New Worlds, but yeah, so it'll be interesting what happens in Star Trek Picard season 3, and if that starts to feel like how it used to be, taking into account it's got the old crew in it. But Adam, before I digress on that, what were you going to say?
Well, mine was just a different digression, actually. Now, so I was just going to say, how do we think we've all watched the Orville? Like, how does Strange New Worlds compare with the Orville? What
Oh,
people's thoughts?
yeah. I still think Strange New Worlds is more like Star Trek, because actually Strange New World Orville is like next gen. Strange New Worlds has the production values better in this day and
Yeah,
age.
it's moved on. It's moved it on, hasn't it? I think.
But it does have more of the original Star Trek to it, and especially with some of the episodes in Strange New Worlds, like the one where they all become a fantasy of the storybook. There's again, you could argue they did that in Next Gen using the holodeck, but it's proper creative, saying that they're not scared to say, because there's no week to week joining story, they're not scared to suddenly do something totally left field, which I really liked in Strange New Worlds. But for sure, we've said this on previous episodes. And until the Strange New Worlds came along, the closest you could get to original Star Trek for easily was either Lower Decks or the Orville. And they did a good job. But like I said, the Picard season 3, if I go back to that digression, that's very much ship based, and it's got all the original next gen crew in it.
I'm looking forward to that.
It'll be interesting to see if it feels like Picard or if it feels like next gen, but with walking sticks. Adam, what were you going to say?
I just think, looking at the trailer, it looks really exciting, but it's that whole nostalgia for next gen, isn't it? Like the whole trailer for season 3 of Picard. So it is going to feel like, well, at least the way the trailer sets out, it's going to feel like the next gen, but just as OAPs. But yeah, it's.
I reckon it'll feel like a next gen movie, just over many episodes. It won't feel like a next gen season. It'll feel like a next gen movie over many episodes. And actually, it's no surprise that I don't know if any of you have seen the footage at one of the recent Comic Cons. Patrick Stewart was sitting up with the other cast members and essentially said, "I think we should do another movie," which got a huge round of applause by the fans. But I think they're saying that because this, in effect, is a movie, and they're going, well, why not do one more movie, because we can. It'll be interesting if anyone at Paramount picks them up on that suggestion. Tal, was your hand up, or are you just scratching your ear?
I'm just scratching my head.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to clarify that for listeners. Simon, thank you for bringing that subject, but also the magic of sci-fi. You've been watching about ILM.
Yeah, and I'm watching a show called Light and Magic, which is on Disney Plus, which is the story of Industrial Light and Magic, which is the company that George Lucas founded to effectively create his special effects for Star Wars, and then, as I found out, lots of other things as well. So I haven't quite finished. I'm a couple of episodes before the end, but I would recommend the show, and I know, Adam, you said you watched a couple of episodes and wasn't a big fan, but I found this show fascinating. It tells a story from literally George Lucas going, how am I going to create these effects for this crazy new movie that I want to make, i.e. Star Wars, and how he basically gets this gang together, how they start experimenting and being innovative, and effectively setting a new standard for special effects in movies. And the first few episodes covers those first 2 movies. So he basically did Star Wars, and then he did The Empire Strikes Back. But then but then actually they started working for, you know, not just the Star Wars stuff, but actually anyone that wanted any kind of special effects within sci-fi would come to them for the special effects, and that actually is still the case up until today. And I've got open in front of me actually the ILM, the Industrial Light and Magic Wikipedia page, and I'm just going to whiz through some of these movies, and I won't be able to read them all because there's so many. But you're going to be surprised about some of these. So obviously, it starts off with the Star Wars movies, Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and then eventually Return of the Jedi. But also, ILM went on to do Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. And sorry, they did all of the Indiana Jones movies. They did some of the Star Trek movies from Star Trek 3 onwards. They did Back to the Future. They did Howard the Duck, Labyrinth. Let me just whiz through Spaceballs. That's a brilliant movie. I'm only doing the sci-fi ones, by the way. There's lots of non-sci-fi movies within here as well. Ghostbusters, The Abyss, another Back to the Future, Total Recall, the original one. I could go on and on. The Terminator movies, Star Trek 6, and I'm only up to 1992. They literally did everything. If I go to some of the TV shows, I'm whizzing forwards now.
The stuff they do more recently, Simon. I'm assuming they have become a post house, like a CGI house, have they now? In terms,
yeah, absolutely right. So listen to just the TV shows that they did last year, right? So this is just TV shows in 2021, and obviously they deal with the Marvel stuff. So they did WandaVision and the Falcon, Winter Soldier, Loki, Hawkeye, The Witcher season 2, the Book of Boba Fett, and The Last Man. That was just the TV shows that they did last year, not including the movies. They're doing the Lord of the Rings. They did Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. They literally do everything. The Boys. They did The Boys. And do you remember
some resume, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, literally, if you want special effects, you go to ILM. They are the guys that do it. And Stephen, do you remember when you talked about those new big video screens that they act in front of?
Yes.
That they first used for the Mandalorian, I think. That was ILM. They invented that, and is now used for Star Trek and pretty much everything else. So it's just incredible the stuff that they've been involved in, going back, 35, nearly 40 years. They've just been at the cutting edge of science fiction special effects. It's I recommend watching this. It's a fun watch. It's entertaining. It's interesting. It's a little bit geeky, but it's a great show.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, that leads us into one of the things I've been watching, which has been a documentary on the history of Star Trek called The Center Seat, which is, I don't know in other countries where it's on, but ironically, it's not on Paramount. I mean, it might be at some point, but it's currently in the UK on Amazon. And actually, it's on Amazon. It's on their free service, Freevee. It's got lots of interviews with the script writers, the showrunners, the producers, people like Rick Berman, all bunch of people, and also you get to hear what Gene Roddenberry did well, what he did bad, how Paramount in effect sidelined him, and you learn everything. But one of the interesting things, linking it directly to what you were talking about, Simon, is obviously ILM were involved with a lot of the movies, but there were certain movies where they tried to not go with ILM, and then ILM were brought in at the last minute because the other people essentially screwed it up and overspent and just produced nothing for the money. And it just makes you realise that ILM obviously are very good at recruitment, and are also very good at internal training, because they managed to consistently find the solutions to the problems, whereas other people may have either claimed they could do it, or, for example, there was one guy they brought in because he did some amazing effects for some adverts, but it's quite different doing that than it was suddenly having to do a whole range of different shots on time and to budget and everything else for Star Trek. And so, yeah, ILM really are in a special place in terms of not only their heritage, but their ability to pass that heritage down, which can only come through internal training and guidelines and making sure the knowledge is passed down from one people layer to the next. And so they're really amazing at what they do, and should be fully congratulated. And I guess, what would you say is George Lucas's biggest contribution to the industry? Star Wars or ILM? Because actually ILM's body of work is way larger, as you pointed out, than Star Wars. I know it's one of those what came first, chicken or the egg question. Without Star Wars, you wouldn't have ILM. But the point is, ILM, you would argue, is actually potentially a greater heritage that he will pass down than Star Wars in itself. And I think it speaks volumes as to his vision in the first place, saying, if we're going to need this, we're going to have to build a company to do it. Let's do it this way, fascinating stuff. So anyway, I recommend checking out The Center Seat on Amazon if you're into Star Trek and want to know all the behind the scenes and the gossip and the politics, of which there was a lot of politics. It'd be really interesting to watch. I haven't watched all of it yet. I'm on one of the, I'd say midway through, where they start looking at Deep Space Nine. And all the issues they had with Deep Space Nine, which we've all forgotten about, because everyone likes Deep Space Nine now, but it was not the darling of the Star Trek world when it came out, and no one liked. Really interesting. No one liked the lack of episodic content, because obviously it always had this overarching storylines, more than one. And actually, in its day, it was new. No one was used to it, and no one liked it. But obviously now people love it, and ironically, it's perfect for streaming. It's
perfect for streaming and perfect for binge watching, which is actually what I did. I don't think I watched it when it was on the telly. I binge watched it when I was at university and should have been studying. But it
explains a lot.
Does explain an awful lot. Yeah, yeah.
So I've got some other stuff to talk about, but I'm going to take a rest. Adam, what have you been enjoying in the world of sci-fi?
Well, I wanted to talk about. I've been carrying on with the Expanse novels. So I've done the first 3, and I've just finished the number 4, which is Kibola Burn. I don't know whether I've said that. Kibola Burn. Whether I've pronounced that correctly. Which I really enjoyed. So thoroughly. So the 4th book in the series. Still enjoying it. It's kind of a bit of a reset book, whereas the first 3, if you've, I don't know how closely the TV series follow it, but it's all about them finding the rings and going through the rings and the first part of the proto-molecule. So that's all the first 3 books. So a lot happens, and a lot of the setting the scene for the overall Expanse universe happens. And then book 4 is a bit of a kind of, it sort of resets that and tries to kind of start again, and does suffer a bit of when you first have your hero in the initial story, it's that kind of accidental hero. They were just some guy and his crew minding their own business, and they got pulled into this very unlikely but end up saving the world and the universe. And it's always hard when you go, okay, these characters, you can believe they accidentally kind of got caught up in that the first time, but then, well, what about the second time and the third time? How do they keep doing that? So it tries to kind of address that and sort of reset where the main character goes. So
I think I need to have another go at this, because I've read the first 3. I think I started reading the 4th book, and it's really interesting actually. I started reading the 4th book and I didn't finish it, and then I got up to season 5 of the series, and I think I haven't watched. Is it up? There's been 6, isn't there, Steve? Stephen knows, isn't you?
Yeah, Stephen knows. I haven't seen this.
Yeah, there was there was the 6th one, which was a shortened one because they ran out of money.
Yeah. So I'm about a third of the way through 5, and I still haven't got through all of that. And it's really interesting because I absolutely loved the first 3 books, and then obviously the seasons as they came on. I didn't think that the TV did quite such a good job with it as the books. I thought the books were brilliant. I thought they just so interesting and so well written. And I just don't know why it just completely fell off a cliff for me. As soon as they found the gates, and almost like anything was possible, it almost like. And I know, Stephen, you really like the kind of the sort of the politics between the whole kind of the spacers and the Martians and the Earthers and all this sort of stuff. And I kind of do like that dynamic. I think it's easier to follow in the TV series, maybe, but I just found that with the books, for me, it just suddenly really, I just completely lost interest. And I don't know why. I've never had that sort of an effect halfway through like normally I'll like if I'm into something, I'll devour it all. But it completely switched me off, and maybe I need to have another go at it. I don't know, but so I'm trying to.
It was a good number 4 is a good little story, and it kind of opens up. It's sort of like they've opened up the gates and they've got access to thousands of worlds. So you're right, the first 3 books are tightly focused on the solar system, and then the groups of the Earthers, the people on Mars, and the Belters, and that's very kind of, all of the stories are kind of those characters, and the political things around that. This kind of, then they've now got thousands of worlds, but it takes the kind of first step. It's sort of almost like the first world that they get to, that's accessible from the rings, and then what happens there. So they do kind of, once you get there, they kind of, the story kind of focuses on that planet. But yeah, you do wonder where they're going to go, because there's still thousands of planets, and that they can then go on.
Does even the proto-molecule really feature again? I can't remember. It doesn't really, does it? There's the detector, wasn't there, and
it stays there in a sense that, you know, that there's the people that created the proto-molecule were wiped out by something even more terrible, and that kind of hangs over book 4, but never really progresses. So it's just this kind of background context, that the most advanced thing that mankind has ever found that can do incredible things.
Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just a simple person when it comes to my, maybe I don't need to know too complex a kind of plot theory, and maybe I would have liked it if it would have just had more of what was good about the first 3. I don't know, rather than trying to do something completely different. I don't know.
I think maybe you might have got bored because it kind of is a reset. It kind of resets to try and establish the books. But
I think that's it. And I think I enjoyed the first 3 so much that I kind of just wanted more of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe I felt a bit hard done by the fact.
Yeah, it's definitely a change of pace and a shift of gear.
And it's a change of scale.
Yeah.
Initially, it's just some humans fighting over this thing they don't understand, and as we then say, then opens up the gates. It opens up all the solar systems, and then, as you said, and there's this overarching thing. Well, what killed the people that created all of this?
Yeah.
And then, but even within the humans, the scale grows, because you've got the interplanetary politics of war.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a book without much warning, because everything changes the moment they've got the gates. Everything changes just like that.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because there wouldn't be a natural change. There would be. It's like today there's no America as in the continent. Now we've discovered America. The world changed at that point. Yeah. So that's essentially what's happened. Actually, that's a good analogy. That's essentially what happens. And so the scale of the books change massively. A bit like, actually, because we've obviously our book. What's it called? We're Legion, the series that I read all of it off.
The Bob books.
Yeah, the Bob books, and actually that almost does the reverse, doesn't it? Because the most recent book, even though the wider universe is still there, I remember when we discussed it, actually it massively, in terms of actually, 3/4 of the writing narrows down to one little story, when all the previous books were all over the place. So for those that love the scale, some of the readers may have been disappointed, because it then narrowed in massively, whereas the Expanse does the opposite, which is no surprising, because what's it called?
The clue is in the title.
Yeah, absolutely. But you do recommend? I mean, you finished the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely recommend it. And I'm definitely going to be carrying on to book 5. I'm taking a bit of a break at the moment, but I'll carry on to the next one. So I'll come back in a couple of podcasts time and say I've done the next one, and see how that lines up.
How many books are there?
There's like 10. There's like, pretty sure there's 10. I think the 10th was released in 2020, I think. And I think that 10th one was the final one, I think. I could be wrong there. Someone could
catching up to do
fact check that. But yeah, I think there's about 10 books. And that's when I actually started reading it, was when I heard about the last. I hadn't heard of any of it. And I heard there's a big fanfare about the last final book in the 10-book series. And I was like, oh, okay. Now this seems to have passed me by, and that's what kind of got me into reading it from the start.
So I think so if I pick up from book 4, then that should be all right then, because I don't really need anything from. Okay. I'll have to have a little think.
Okay, excellent. So Tal, what do you want to talk about? What have you been enjoying?
Well, this is an interesting one. Talk about change of pace. This is a change of pace. First question: has anyone actually seen Night Sky? It's on Amazon.
No, I've not seen that, Sky.
I came across it, and after I do this little blurb, you may decide that you don't want to go anywhere near it, but it's really, I'm actually really enjoying it. But what's interesting is that it's incredibly slow, and it got axed after the first season. So I know for a fact it got cancelled at the end of the season. I think they finished the season, but I'm a bit gutted because I actually think it's going to actually develop into a really good story. But I think I'm going to try and explain what it's about, because I'm 4 episodes in, so I haven't seen the whole thing. I think it's an 8-episode season, so I'm about halfway through, and I haven't got a bloody clue what's going on. But I'm loving it, and it's really odd, and it's bloody slow. And I normally hate stuff like that. It's really slow. And there was that. I think Adam, you watched it. There was a thing about the season, that series that was all about, there were like individual stories. Do you remember people were kind of like in the woods? The thing in the woods that felt quite Scandinavian. What was it?
Yeah.
That was like, they had time travel and things in it as well. It has the same feeling as that in terms of its pacing.
Tales from the Loop.
Yeah, Tales from the Loop. So it's obviously, I mean, it's nothing to do with Tales from the Loop, but it has, I don't actually know whether it's the same director or what, but it's beautifully directed, beautifully shot, and amazingly well acted. The two main protagonists, J.K. Simmons and Sissy Spacek, are this old couple, and the chemistry between them is unbelievable. I mean, you watch it and you just kind of like, she's basically not well. We don't really know whether she's got, I think she may have cancer or she's got something that's terminal. He's looking after her. And they're like a married couple that have been together forever. They absolutely love each other. And it's just amazing to watch the chemistry between the two of them. But basically they live in this kind of house in the country, and in the basement of their shed is a tunnel that goes into a kind of elevator type thing, and that becomes an observation deck of another planet. So basically they go up in this elevator, and they've got an armchair in there, and they've got a little sofa and stuff for them to sit, and basically they sit and they watch this planet. And there are doors to exit, but they've obviously never exited because they don't know whether they can breathe outside or anything, blah, blah, blah. So they just go and they just sit. But there are other links. So there's lots of things going on. There's another thing going on where people can travel instantaneously between places, which is kind of comes, you learn as you go through, I think, in episode season 2 and season 3. And this guy mysteriously turns up in their observation deck, injured, and he's a young guy, sort of in his 20s. And he claims he doesn't know where he came from, but there's more to his story. So it's about, I think we think he does know, and he's kind of either escaping something or running away or trying to find something. We don't know exactly what that is. So it's all very mysterious. It reveals itself incredibly slowly. If it weren't for the acting, I think I would say it was boring, but it really isn't. It's just quite something to watch. It's really good. And I'm annoyed. And like I say, I definitely want to get through. I mean, I think it is picking up a little bit now, but like I say, that's 4 episodes in. I'm pretty sure they're quite long episodes as well. I think they're nearly an hour, or maybe even an hour each. Yes.
I have a confession. I think I've seen this pop up on Amazon.
Yeah,
and I haven't clicked on it because I've assumed it was like a Patrick Moore, The Sky at Night type of thing. I've assumed it was a kind of space, which I thought, oh, well, that might be interesting, but I didn't know. That's what I was going to ask at the beginning. I didn't know if it was fiction or
no, it is purely fiction, and it's very much sci-fi. It's an unfortunate name, yeah, definitely, because. As Adam pointed out, for us Brits, the night sky or the sky at night has a very different connotation. But yeah, no, it is, and it's really nicely directed and really nicely done. I definitely recommend it, and it's one of those things. I don't know whether I'm going to get to the end of it and feel worse because I've like wasted my time watching it, because I know it doesn't go anywhere, because they probably won't resolve everything, not within 8 episodes, because like I said, it's really slow. Or I'm just going to be like, oh, I really enjoyed that because it was just really nicely done, and kind of appreciate it for being a really well put together series. I think I mean, the acting is brilliant. So,
but you need to come back and tell us when it's finished, so we can decide whether to watch it or not. Will you be annoyed when you get to the end and say it's a waste of time, or do you still think it's worth watching?
No, this is the thing. I think I'm gonna. There's a little bit of obviously a part of me that's annoyed. I'm kind of feel like I should write to Jeff Bezos and ask if he can just bankroll another season. But
yeah, I'm sure he accepts our emails. So I think we've got a direct line to. I think whatever we say, I think he'll act on that straight away.
I'm sure he's going to come on the show at some point, isn't he?
Everyone does. Everyone does. If they know it exists, everyone does. Everyone does.
You're saying that everyone who knows our podcast exists is coming on the show.
So how many guests have we had?
About 4 people on the show.
The important thing is when with him, you have to go up and tell him about it. But when you do that, people respond positively.
When I write to him and ask for a second series of Night Sky, I'll mention the podcast and just see if we can. Go on,
Stephen, is that a dig for one of a certain wormy that met a certain person that's connected with sci-fi but didn't mention our podcast? Is that
you might say that, but I couldn't possibly comment.
We can't say anything more about that, can we? That's it.
We can say. I just didn't. We can say that I met.
I think it's a disgrace, but but okay, you know what? Just say, Tal, I'm going to watch it, or at least try it. You've got me interested in it.
Stick with it. Watch. You've got to stick with it, but appreciate the performance and appreciate the quiet space, because it's actually the quietness of it that I think is what for me is I found really appealing. It was just maybe I had to be in the right mood for it. I remember when I sat and watched the first episode, I was like, I'm not sure I can do this, and I've wanted something a bit pacier. But at least you've been warned that it isn't pacey.
No, that's what's attracting me to it. So it's something I could really chill to. So that sounds really, really good. Something quite contrasting to that, though, I'll pick up. Obviously, we were discussing ILM earlier, and how they come from the world of Star Wars. Well, some people are saying the best Star Wars has only just recently ever come out, and that is Andor. And have any of you three watched it, or am I the only guy to have watched it?
I'm watching it.
You're watching it. Adam's got his hand up.
Oh yeah, I mean, I want to avoid a kind of hot take because I've only kind of watched the first episode, and a bit of the second, so I don't want to kind of sort of say too much.
And I've got one episode left to watch, I think, which I'm not. Yeah, well, I'm one from the end. Actually, no, I'm not. I think how many episodes are there in the season?
Well, there's 6. I think there's 6 so far. I don't know if that's 6 and it was done. I actually wasn't too sure, or if there's one more still to come. But it's. I think there's more to come. I don't.
Yeah, and there's been more. I think there's been more than 6. Hang on, I've got Google in front of me.
No, I don't think it's been more than 6 yet. But I'm just going to dive into it and because there's a 7 coming. It's not finished yet. It's not finished.
And 8 and 9. Yeah, it's gonna. It's got a few to go.
It is fantastic. It is firstly similar to the Mandalorian and all that stuff. It feels fantastic. It feels gritty. It feels Star Wars. Whereas Marvel, and we're going to discuss some Marvel soon. Let's be honest, is becoming more and more of a spoof of itself, and the CGI is getting worse and worse. Star Wars, even though it's made by the same company, is going completely opposite direction. Adam, I'm getting into a rhythm here, but
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say something you said there. You said it feels like Star Wars. It actually feels like Blade Runner. That's what I thought. Like the rain and the grittiness of Andor actually doesn't, in some ways, doesn't feel like Star Wars. Actually feels like a bit of a departure from what we've seen from Star Wars.
Oh, it's in some ways, but you look at the Mandalorian and I think ignoring the prequel movies, even the original Star Wars, there was a grittiness to the bar and to what's the name? Mos Eisley and all that stuff. They've clearly accentuated it because I think, as we discussed in a few episodes back, everything has to be darker and grittier and everything nowadays.
There's no rain. This is the first.
There's no rain.
First episode that's had rain in it.
It's taken it to new level with the rain. But actually, Star Wars was always famous for, especially the movies. They always tried to have sand like wood clothes and space, as in they obviously tried to have a range of aesthetics to really shake up the movies. And you're right, they didn't have rain, but the rain does feature a lot in Andor, and so does a mist as well in episode 6. But the point is, it's fantastic. The acting is fantastic. I mean, there's one thing: if you're British, which obviously none of our French listeners are, it does initially in the first episode feel like EastEnders in space, because many of the people cast are either people from EastEnders or should have been in the EastEnders, because obviously it's all shot over here, like everything's shot over here. But it's really good, and there's so much more to reveal. Hence the episode 7, 8, and 9 that Simon talked about. There's so much to reveal, but it's totally grasp. You can grasp what's going on. It's not over your head. There aren't lots of overlapping plot lines, even though there's clearly stuff happening in the background. They're just yet to reveal, and it's totally and utterly gripping. Simon.
Yeah, I can't say I'm as into it as you are. Then, like I agree with a lot of what you say around the production and the acting. It's made very, very well. I think it's very slow. There are whole episodes where nothing happens. I'm on the same episode as you, by the way, which is episode 6, and it builds up to quite a big thing.
I've watched episode 6. I've watched episode 6.
No, I've seen it as well, and that's a good episode, right? It builds up nicely to that episode, but there's a lot of not much happening before then. There's a few episodes to go, so I'm hoping there'll be a lot more in that. I think it's a good story to be told, right? I think that whereas you could argue that things like The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett were not necessarily stories that needed to be told, I think this is a story that needs to be told. This is the almost sort of the creation of the rebellion, and actually the watching the machinations of the Empire, and seeing how they have their meetings, and one of them's with his mum having his breakfast, and there's some interesting stuff around sort of the backstory to the rebellion and to the Empire, which is obviously leading up towards Rogue One. It's a prequel to Rogue One, right? So I like the idea of the story. I like the fact that they're telling this story. Just for me, not enough has happened. It's not been busy enough. And I know Star Wars is traditionally quite slow in the way it does things, but literally there was a whole episode like last week where they're just walking around the fields and moaning at each other. It's like really not a lot happened, and I need to see more. I need more action. Tom?
Sorry. So here's something. I haven't seen Rogue One yet. It's the only thing I haven't seen. Partly because the kids kept shouting and they didn't want to watch it. I don't know why. But because they love everything else. If the fact that I haven't seen Rogue One, do you think I should watch this and then Rogue One?
I don't think it matters.
No, I'm sure it doesn't really matter, because obviously they've done it in that order. But I just wondered whether, a bit like you watch the Marvel stuff sometimes in kind of order of kind of chronology rather than when they were released. I wondered whether it might make for an interesting watching experience, whether I would understand, whether there's anything in Rogue One that I would go, oh, that would kind of make sense. Don't know, I haven't seen Rogue One or either, but no, it doesn't really make a difference.
You should.
I don't know.
It doesn't make a difference for which order you watch them, but you should definitely watch Rogue One. And I do think, based upon how episode 6, in effect, in my view, made all the other episodes worth it. I'm very excited about what happens in 7, 8, 9, because as Simon says, this is the birth of the rebellion. And one thing I will say, and I don't need to say this as a personal slight, Simon, because I think it's interesting. I heard someone else discuss this, or it was an article, because people have been moaning about Lord of the Rings as well, how the first few episodes, nothing happened. I think we've forgotten how to watch slow TV. Think about Tinker Tailor Spy and all these classics. By today's standards, people would say, oh, but nothing's happening. There's actually quite a lot happening in the first few episodes of Andor, because it's investing in the world of Andor and in that background stuff. And the fact if you think about it, the guy you were talking about was having breakfast with his mum. He's not part of the Empire, as in the army of the Empire. He's part of he's part of the overlap overhang of the old Republic with the commercial guilds, which are then in effect being shut down by the Empire because they're not hardcore enough. There's just a whole load of really interesting stuff, which maybe you could argue you don't need for the main plot to move on, but it's just it's like a really good bowl of soup, and you're finding more stuff in it, which to add richness to it. And and you need time to allow these things to come out. And I think maybe part of the problem is Marvel movies. Marvel movies, let's be honest, this is why they were criticized by what's his name, the famous film director who's very small, who says they like theme park rides. Yeah, superhero movies are like theme park rides, and he says they're not really movies, and maybe that's really what he means. Is they're just
Tarantino? You talking about Tarantino?
No, the really small guy who made the Irishman recently. He's not that small, but he's pretty small. Ricky Gervais made a joke about how he doesn't understand how the guy is criticizing movies, comparing them to theme park rides, taking into account he'd never be able to get on a theme park ride. But I've got his name. But he's a very famous film director. So one of our French listeners will inevitably write in. But the point is, if you think about all the superhero movies, Marvel especially, you go from action sequence to action sequence, and we've been pre-programmed on it. In fact, Star Trek 3, not the original Star Trek 3, but the reboot Star Trek 3, they gave that to an action director. And if you think about it, it's all just action sequence, because that's what people have been programmed into watching now. What I think is quite brave about Andor and things like this, and maybe that's streaming allows them to do it, is they're not going for action sequence. They let it build and build and build. And then what was the action sequence in Andor before episode 6, in the town? Was that episode 3 or 4?
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that was good.
And at that point, I thought, now it's starting to get going.
Yeah, but you felt it was rewarded because of everything to that point, and then it goes down again and builds up again. I think that's.
But they're only giving us one episode a week, right? If they allowed us to binge it, then I'd be okay with sort of that dip and then back up again. But they just give you one episode a week, so you kind of you watch that one episode and you're like, nothing happens, and now I've got to wait another week. Maybe something will happen next week.
But is that a problem?
If they gave it to me all at once, I might be okay with that.
That's an interesting point. My question now is that a problem with the writing, or is that the format and our expectation? Because, in the old days before streaming, you'd have to wait a week anyway.
You see, maybe, so this is strange, right? Because I wasn't bored by Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I'd heard from the reviews that it was going to be quite slow. I was expecting to be bored, but actually I quite enjoyed the richness of looking at these different peoples and these groups and getting to know them. And I didn't think it was a show where not much happened. I thought that quite a lot happened. I would say that the Rings of Power was much less boring than some of the Andor episodes.
So I'm going to ask a question then, because I imagine it's going to be a slightly different answer. I'm going to ask both Stephen and Simon this, because Adam, I don't think you've seen enough of it yet. You're not quite the same. Are you at the same place that they're at, Adam?
No. Is
it the best Star Wars series so far?
No.
Stephen?
Hard question. I think it's the most thoughtful Star Wars series so far. I think if you're wanting more bang blast, The Mandalorian is excellent, especially the second season. But and the end of the first one. But I think Andor is the most, a bit like Rogue One, or it was, in my opinion, the most thoughtful Star Wars movie, better than actually all the others. I believe that Andor is the most thoughtful and.
That wasn't the question, Stephen. That wasn't the question.
I'm not
answer the question, Stephen. We don't want any of this dilly-dallying around.
I'm not accepting the premise of the question. I'm reshaping the question for my answer. So there you go. I can't answer it finally, but right now I think. I tell you what, and right now, apart from that scene with Luke Skywalker when he turns up initially in The Mandalorian, I'd say right now Andor has a lot more of that tingle feeling going for me, because it's so well grounded and as Simon said, is dealing with something really profound, the birth of the rebellion. you know, you're seeing complete other sides of things that you never thought you'd see. Like, what's her name? Monmouth? What's her Monomer? What's her name? The woman who gives the briefing in the return. Yeah, yeah. The woman who gives the briefing in the Return of the Jedi, saying this is what we're going to go and do. What's her name? Not num. Hold on, I'll Google this.
How
Start
are you gonna Google that?
Return of the Jedi. Minimum.
Her name's gonna be like
Mon Mothma.
Mon Mothma.
Okay, yeah.
That
So
sounds like a character from Godzilla, wasn't that?
Lord of the Rings.
No, but anyway, you know who she is. She's the woman in white who gives the briefing in Return of the Jedi. You actually see her and her whole family life in Andor.
Oh, nice.
Is that her?
Yes.
Don't forget the henchmen's families. Everyone always forgets the henchmen's families.
Yeah, well, she's not a henchman, she's a goodie. But the point is, you're seeing the beginning of the rebellion, and you're seeing the senators and the people like this. So we already know about Leia's dad, right? But we're seeing her and these people all start to, you know, show up and how it all happened. And I think it's fascinating. So yeah, for me right now, this is some of the best Star Wars out there that you can get. There you go. So
I have to say, I'm still enjoying the Star Wars series more than I'm enjoying the Marvel series.
Well,
so
I think that's a really good opportunity to maybe to discuss and catch up on some of the Marvel series.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So I don't know, Simon, do you want to jump into Thor?
Crikey.
There's a question.
Did somebody else say they were going to talk about Thor?
Hot under the collar. I think I said I was going to talk about Thor.
Let's go to Adam to talk about Thor.
Jump into Thor, Simon.
It seems like such a long time ago that I watched it, and I was going to rewatch it on Disney Plus. Listen, yeah. I'll be quick on Thor because the reviews, from what I've read, haven't been that positive about the latest Thor movie. I thought it was really good. Like in the same vein as Thor Ragnarok was just a funny movie. Thor: Love and Thunder was as well. I thought it was it was an okay story. I thought that it was funny. It was entertaining. I really liked what they did with the mighty Thor, the female Thor. There was some really silly stuff in it with the axe and talking to the axe and things like that. But overall, I thought it was a really good movie. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But apparently, not everyone did.
I left the cinema with a similar thought as you. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought when I left the cinema, it's not as good as Ragnarok. I think when I've kind of reflected on it, though, I do wonder whether they've just turned the character entirely into a comic character. Like Ragnarok was great because it was still a kind of Thor movie that had that kind of edge of, I don't know, harder edge, whatever. But he was still Thor, and but this one, it's almost like, yeah, he's completely like a character of ridicule and fun, and as you say, like talks to his axe. You know, they're ripping off his clothes. So actually, after I began to think about it, I did wonder whether, yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was a fun movie. But really, whether it's been taken too far and it's just like a joke now. Like the next Thor movie, is it just going to be a comedy?
I thought they'd already turned him into a joke, though, and I was okay with that. Like, I think that the first two movies were, I don't think were as bad as some people say they were. Thor: The Dark World is often said as being the worst of the Marvel movies. I don't think it's that bad, but when for some reason they decided in the Avengers he was going to be the comic relief, and everybody seemed to like that. And by the time they got to Ragnarok, he was already, the silly sort of not quite buffoon, but it was already all about the comedy. But I have no problem with that at all because I think he does it brilliantly, and I think they're great movies. Those last two, you're right. Ragnarok is better, but I still think Love and Thunder is very good.
I thought Love and Thunder was amusing, and I certainly didn't dislike it, but the issues I had with it were I'm not too sure if it did anything to move the whole Marvel story along. Again, and the CGI in all the Marvel TV series or movies are, I don't know, they just feel really, I don't know, just poor at times. And yeah, I enjoyed Thor, but I'm not too sure what the purpose of the movie was, except to do more Thor and make people laugh. Um, but that's maybe not a criticism of Thor in itself. There's so many bits of Marvel now, and we're told it's all moving forward in one of its phases. I can't remember what phase.
It's phase 4. I think your
Phase
criticism.
4,
Yeah.
But I actually don't think phase 4 is a phase. That I know there will be some movies that definitely move to the next big, whatever the next Avengers spectacle is. But I think they're doing lots of other movies along the way just to, create movies that will put bums on seats and entertain people. But I'm not too sure all of it's crucial or critical. And so from that point of view, for those of us that buy or bought into the universe, that's what I mean. I think they're spoofing themselves too much at times now, and that means they're taking the mickey of the audience to some degree, because for us the stakes really mattered. Think about it. When there are famous videos, or I remember when I went to the Odeon with my daughter for, or was it Endgame?
Oh,
Was
yeah.
Endgame the N one or the one before?
Yes. Well, there's Infinity War, then Endgame, but yeah, it did.
There was a moment where everyone goes like this and applauds, but they're applauding because it's so cool, but also the stakes are so high, and it's like, this really matters. They've all turned up on the screen at once, and it's all going to be okay. But you don't feel any of that with the most recent ones, and with Thor, it just feels like they're going through the motion on a green screen.
I think there were some of those moments in the Spider-Man movie. Some of those great moments where you wanted to clap, and I think it's Endgame wasn't the last time we had those moments, but I do agree that nothing's come close to Endgame, possibly with the exception of Spider-Man. No Way Home. None of the other movies have come close to Endgame.
Yeah, Tom.
I haven't actually got a lot to say. Actually, I think you've covered most of it. I'm agreeing. I'm actually halfway between Simon and Stephen, in so much as, and I don't think Stephen was saying he hated it either. But I mean, I just think that I agree. It was quite pithy and a little bit. It felt very what's his name, Taika Waititi. It felt quite kind of. It felt very much him. And I know obviously, you could tell it was his hand in it, and that's not necessarily a criticism, because I actually think he's brilliant, and I think Korg and everything are just brilliant, and great characters, and really really well done. And it is what you kind of go watch those films for, in a way. But I think I would have liked it to have had a bit more depth to it. I think it it felt a little bit. But having said that, the time didn't drag. I watched it we all sat down as a family and watched it, and we all did actively kind of laugh at bits and stuff, and thought they were quite funny. And it's like so from that point of view, it's definitely a good couple of hours of entertainment. I wouldn't knock it, and I don't regret watching it. I just I think, but I agree with the whole phase 4 thing. I think I don't think, and maybe it's just we're impatient, and like you said, and I think also, again, going back to, my personal experience with the Marvel films was that we watched them all pretty much in lockdown, and I'd seen some of them, but I hadn't by any means seen them all, and not seen them in order. And obviously the fact that we binged so many, but the fact that there were so many that kind of tied in, or at least, the whole Wakanda story and the whole kind of Avengers and how everything kind of tied in with all that, there was just that nice kind of thread, and you could kind of look at that thread, and you knew you were going to get a little bit of that from every sort of film. And then the recent stuff just hasn't really delivered on that.
Yeah. Talking about frivolous bits of Marvel, let's move on to the other thing I think we want to talk about is who wants to tackle She-Hulk? Tao does.
Don't give too much away. I've only seen two episodes.
Well, no, I'm not going to give too much away, because I put my hand up quite quickly there, but I've not seen the last episode. So She-Hulk is really problematic. It's a real shame for me. I really, really wanted to enjoy it. For some reason, out of all the season, I don't know why, I was quite looking forward to this one. I don't know why, I just thought I'd do well. And the first episode is obviously great, because everyone's seen You've only seen 2, Simon. Everyone else has seen.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the last one, like I said. I've heard the last episode is really good, so that's obviously something that I need to get to. The problem with it is it just doesn't really go anywhere. And the funny thing is, just briefly about, like, obviously having seen Ms. Marvel, which I know we might talk about as well, but Ms. Marvel felt like some of the kind of a little bit like some of the Team Marvel seasons that aren't related to the MCU, the stuff that has been on around for ages, you know, in that it feels like it's very much aimed at a younger audience. Obviously, because the main protagonist is a young teenager, and I guess maybe that's why it's written in that way. But I still enjoyed it as an adult, could watch it and still enjoy it, and I actually did quite like it. I liked the story within it. I thought that it was done quite well, dealt with quite well. This just is like, it's very, very, very self-indulgent, and all the fourth wall, breaking the fourth wall stuff. I mean, it's fine for the first couple of episodes because you think it's quite quirky. You think, oh, that's quite cute. She's talking to the camera, you know. It's like, you know, she's talking to us, and it's kind of a little kind of thing. And it just gets more and more annoying, that, because she just kind of just keeps doing it, and you know, it suspends any kind of reality or anything within it. It just feels it feels like a proper cartoon, like a really like cheap cartoon, the whole thing, really.
My big question is, did we need this series? Does it add anything to the Marvel universe whatsoever? I mean, that's the question I'm putting out there. I'll be interested to know what Simon thinks once he's finished watching it. I'm yet to watch the last 3 episodes, I'll be honest. But so far it's non-offensive. It just serves no purpose. It says no purpose. You know, Moon Knight.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better. I thought that they were going to start at least tying more things in, and you know, there is the bit with the Abomination, and they tie that in with Shang-Chi and the guy from Doctor Strange, the other guy who's the guardian with the keys. You know, they tie all that. They bring him in, but he's just there. I mean, again, they're bringing them all in almost just as a kind of comedy kind of element, you know, like kind of like, oh, this is funny, we'll bring them in and make them do something really funny and out of character.
But this is my point about Thor, is there seems to be this tone in Marvel in general, which is we'll spoof up our own characters, so then they're left with nothing serious.
I think this is a far more heinous kind of crime than Thor, I think, in some respects.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, but Ms. Marvel wasn't like that, though, right? Ms. Marvel was was an interesting story. Was actually educational in some ways around and in terms of sort of history and culture, and actually they told the story in a really good way. And it felt like it needed to be told. It was a great introduction of a new company, a new character. I didn't think it was cheap. I thought the special effects were good, and the series built and built and built as it went through, and it finished really well. I thought it was an excellent season.
I agree. I actually really like Ms. Marvel. I don't know whether my comment earlier was implying that it wasn't. This was on. I was making a comparison. I actually thought Ms. Marvel was a really good series, and I think as good as probably one of the better sort of series we've had. From thing, She-Hulk is a completely another level in terms of just it being terrible. You know, and it's a shame because, you know, I kind of like thought, well, I'll give it a chance, you know. But it even felt like, you know, and then going back to what I said about, oh, you know, at least Ms. Marvel felt, yeah, maybe it was sort of aimed at a slightly younger audience, but it was definitely accessible for any age group. I felt She-Hulk, I thought it was almost, I mean, it wasn't aimed at kids because it's quite adult themed, because there's obviously it's about her, there's quite a few episodes about her love life. But that's the other thing. It's like, you know, it's just, they kind of keep going on that side of things. And it was funny for a couple of episodes, but they that is a recurring theme throughout. And I know it's part of her character in the fact that she's a single woman and she wants to maybe find someone, but it's like, it's just, it doesn't go anywhere. You know, it doesn't serve any purpose. Like what Stephen said, it doesn't serve any purpose within the season.
If you want grounded Marvel, it does exist, but you've got to go back to Daredevil, which they're going to be redoing in some shape or form. But you go back to Daredevil and
Yeah.
Jessica Jones and Luke Cage
Yeah,
and
yeah,
even Iron
sure.
Fist, those were well-grounded shows. And
But
actually, I would say, but they were better quality than the ones that are at the moment. I'll give you
This
that.
is a bit of a spoiler, but you may have heard this anyway. You do know Daredevil's coming into She-Hulk, don't you?
Oh my god, I can't believe you did that.
Yes, you do.
No, I did know
Yeah,
that. I
you
did
do.
know that.
And
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but you've got someone, and I really enjoyed Daredevil. I thought it was a great season. It was great. There was some really good stuff around that time, Jessica Jones and all that, and I thought it was really well done. But they brought Daredevil in. I'm probably shouldn't even say anything.
No, don't tell me anymore.
All right, but they don't. Anyway.
Thanks for that, Sal.
Leave it there.
Thanks for that contribution.
They missed a trick. They missed a trick even with that, where they could have,
Okay, stop. No.
Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
A bit.
No. We heard you saying, "Can you hear me?" Well, I think we'll bring this to a close because there's a lot to edit, and Adam's in the internet is not good enough for him to join in. So on these bombshells of discussion on the future of Marvel and whether it's up to the same standards as Star Wars, which is funny because I'll be honest, a few years ago Marvel was all over Star Wars. I'll just remind people of that, and everyone was criticizing Star Wars for having weak writing and weak characters and everything else. It's interesting how things change. But I think the takeaway is that Star Trek seems to now be getting things right. Star Wars is getting things right, and Marvel can't work out if it's a serious thing, a comic book, or a comedy show. I think that's
good summary.
Thanks for good summary. And that's pretty.
There we go.
Yeah, my work is done.
And that The Expanse is all about bigness.
Yes.
And Adam is literally frozen with the funniest of faces. There we go. Right. Simon Cohen, thank you very much for joining us on 4 Men and a Wormhole.
Thank you, guys.
Adam Leach, do you want to try saying goodbye?
Goodbye.
Oh, perfect line there.
Yeah, okay.
That way. Tyle Silverman, as always, thank you very much for joining and sharing with us. And I'm Stephen Govich, your everboarding host, thanking you for joining us on 4 Men in a Wormhole.
4 Men in a Wormhole!